Good afternoon, Chamber members. For those of you I haven't met yet, I'm Sabrina Binkley, Head of School at Spruce Tree Montessori and Board Chair for the Greater Fairbanks Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to take a moment, as we do each week, to thank our executive partners whose logos you saw on the screen before we began our program today. These businesses are really the backbone of business in our community and a pillar of strength for the Fairbanks Chamber. A full list of our executive partners can be found on our website. I'd like to encourage our community this week to respond to the 2020 census if you have not done so already. Results from the census direct funding to roads, schools, community development, and planning. And it's very important to have an accurate count of our population to ensure our community receives our share of funding for the next 10 years. The deadline is coming up fast on September 30. You can complete your census online at 2020census.gov. Or if you happen to still have the census you received in the mail, or you may have gotten on your doorstep, you can use that paper copy as well. Now to today's program. Welcome to the Fairbanks Chamber's Political Forum for Fairbanks North Star Borough Assembly candidates. Because of the large number of candidates on this forum, we have extended today's event for 90 minutes so that each candidate has time to touch on a variety of issues. We hope you will be able to stay with us until 1:30 so you can take advantage of this opportunity to learn about the candidates. If you can't, however, stay the whole time, or you missed any of our other chamber forums, recordings of all 2020 Fairbanks Chamber forums can be found online at fairbankschamber.org. The Greater Fairbanks Chamber of Commerce is a nonpartisan organization which advocates for the conditions that will allow businesses of all sizes to prosper in our interior region. We are focused on the betterment of our members by working with all levels of state, local, and federal government officials. Our goal for our political forums is to help you in the audience understand your choices during this fall's election cycle. The candidates here today will appear on the ballot for the municipal election on October 6th. Please note that, like always, you have a choice this fall whether to vote in person or by mail. You still have time to apply for an absentee ballot for the October 6th borough and city elections. Download the form from the borough's election information page on fnsb.us. Your application must be received by September 29. It may need a few extra days to travel through the mail, so today would be an excellent day to fill that form out and send it in. Now I'd like to introduce you to today's moderator, who has volunteered to lead today's discussion. Tyler Williams is a member of the Fairbanks Chamber Board of Directors. He grew up in Fairbanks and entered the advertising and marketing world in 2005 as a freelance videographer, eventually landing at Newmouth Advertising in 2008. In 2015, he purchased that agency and formed Mammoth Marketing. Since then, Mammoth has expanded their services to meet the digital revolution. His team provides a range of media services to many businesses and organizations that you'll find right here locally. Welcome, Tyler, and thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Sabrina. I'd like to kick off the forum with a word of thanks to the candidates who have joined us today. Thank you for your willingness to serve in public office and for the work you will do on behalf of the residents and businesses in Fairbanks area. As I introduce you, please wave so the audience knows who you are. The candidates running for Assembly Seat D are Donald Crocker, Chris Ludtke, and Tammie Wilson. The candidates running for Assembly Seat E are Assembly Member Jimmy Cash and Shaun Tacke. The candidates running for Assembly Seat H are Assembly Member Aaron Lojewski and Ryan Van Reenen. Thank you for participating and welcome to the forum, everybody. I also want to extend the Chamber's sincere thanks to our Political Forum Series sponsors, Alaska Oil and Gas Association, Doyon Limited, Hale and Associates, Hedgecock Group Real Estate, and Mac Federal Credit Union. Now I got to turn the page. These organizations support the informed voting and encourage you to engage with the important issues facing our state. And now let's do a quick review of the event format itself. The candidates will be asked a series of questions that are either short answer or yes or no. Each candidate will be given the same amount of time to answer each question. We've also reserved time at the end for audience questions. If any of our online audience have questions throughout the presentation, please type them into the chat box on, well, this says YouTube, but I think it's GoToMeeting, but it might be on YouTube too. Chamber staff will review the questions and select a few to ask the candidates. We have a limited time here today, so I encourage the audience to engage with the candidates outside of this forum to learn more about them, their philosophies, and their vision for the Fairbanks North Star Borough. Now to the candidates. I have a few last-minute instructions before we begin your opening statements. As I ask each question, I will give you a time limit. I will also indicate what order you will answer in. Candidates for Assembly Seat D will always answer back-to-back, as will candidates for Seat E and Seat H. This will help viewers understand their choices for each seat. After each person has finished speaking, I will indicate the next candidate, just in case you forget the order. I'd like to remind you that our official timekeeper will start the timer on screen when you begin speaking. Please stop when your time is up so we can cover all of the questions. The timer will briefly flash red if you are in the middle of a sentence when the time expires. If necessary, we will mute your line to keep the forum moving along. And with that, let's get started. Each candidate will now give a brief 30-second introduction. We will start with Seat D in alphabetical order. This will be Mr. Crocker, Mr. Ludtke, then Ms. Wilson. Next, we will continue with Seat E, Assembly Member Cash, followed by Mr. Tacke, and eventually Seat H, Assembly Member Lojewski, and then Mr. Van Reenen. Mr. Crocker, please start us off with your 30-second opening statement.
Thank you to the Greater Fairbanks Chamber of Commerce, and also to those of you that are watching on YouTube or GoToMeeting for engaging in local elections. I have been a community leader and organizer for over 10 years in this wonderful borough. I currently work at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, where I am the Assistant Director for Student Support Services, a federally grant-funded program that provides college access. I am also working as the President of the Breadline Board of Directors and the Fairbanks Children's Museum. I've been a server, I've been a cook, I love local businesses. Thank you.
Okay, and now on to Mr. Ludtke.
Hi, my name is Chris Ludtke, running for Borough Assembly Seat D. I've been living in Fairbanks since 2011. I've been at Fort Knox for the past 4 or 5 years. I'm a blaster up there. I'm running to end government theft. I think if everyone was allowed to keep their income at all levels, property tax, income tax, estate tax, those are the big three in my book. If we were allowed to keep our income, the economy would be a lot healthier, more small businesses would be successful.
Thank you, and Ms. Wilson. Ms. Wilson, you are muted right now.
Obviously, technology is not my strong suit, but I'm trying to get better. So my name is Tammie Wilson. Thank you for the opportunity today. And, I'm a mother, grandmother. I'm lucky enough to have what I call my dream job. I am a family advocate for those who have been involved in the Office of Children's Services, helping to reunify their families as soon as possible. I grew up in a small business, and so community is everything for me. Thank you.
Okay, so that was all of Seat D. Moving on to Seat H, Assemblymember Cash.
That'd actually be Seat E. But my name is Jimmy Cash. I'm running for Assembly Seat E. I was born and raised here in Fairbanks. My wife, Kristen, and I have 5 kids. They're all homeschooled. Well, the older 3 anyways. I'm a general contractor. I do maintenance and remodeling, and I'm currently serving in a 1-year term on the Assembly, and I'm running for a 3-year term. I'm fighting for increased property rights, lower property taxes, and a sustainable budget, because right now we really need to watch the money that the borough is spending, especially in the financial situation that everybody's in. Thank you.
Mr. Cash is correct. I mean Seat E. So continuing with Seat E, Mr. Tacke.
Thank you. Thank you to all the members of the chamber, and thanks for everyone online listening. I was born and raised here in Fairbanks, Alaska. I graduated from West Valley High School, graduated from UAF with a degree in accounting. I have worked in the private sector as a financial planning and analysis accountant at Fort Knox. I have then launched off to be an entrepreneur. So started a small business that's now grown to 28 employees. And I have 2 young kids as well that are in the public school system right So I understand those issues, and I'm looking forward to serving the community.
All right, thank you, Mr. Tacke. Moving on now to seat H, Assembly Member Lojewski.
Hi, I'm Aaron Lojewski. I'm going to share or save a lot of the politics for later, but the short answer is I'm on the Assembly currently, and I've done some really great things. I can't wait to share with you how they're going to help the community long term in the future. I came up here as soon as I could when I was 18 as an adult. I went to UAF. I graduated with a Bachelor's of Business Administration from UAF. I went on to get a Master's of Economics from UAF. Starting in college, I worked in the visitor industry. I still do. I worked for a Northern Alaska Tour Company, a local small business, and then I went on to start my own small business 3.5 years ago or so, which has been doing really well the last 3 years, and it's doing not as well right now as you could imagine, but plenty well to survive the current challenging environment.
All right, time to move on to our last candidate in seat H, Mr. Van Runen.
Thank you for having me. I'm 35 years old and a lifelong Alaskan. I'm a laborer by trade with a small business background in commercial and residential construction, and I have a record of job creation. I'm also a husband and a father. I have 2 children, an 11-year-old daughter and a 4-month-old son. My daughter currently attends public school here, and one day my son will. So I am personally invested in education as both an economic driver and a moral imperative. I'm running for Borough Assembly to ensure my small business, your small business, and all of our families and residents are part of an inclusive, mutually prosperous economy.
Okay, thank you, candidates. And now we have a series of questions based on the Fairbanks Chamber's advocacy agenda and the issues suggested by Chamber members. So for the first question, you will have 45 seconds to respond. We will start with seat D again, Mr. Ludtke, followed by Ms. Wilson and Mr. Crocker. Then we'll move to seat E, Mr. Tacke, Assembly Member Cash, and then seat H, Mr. Van Runen, and Assembly Member Lojewski. The Borough Assembly is responsible for approving the borough budget, setting the mill rate for taxation, and appropriating funds to provide for borough services. The question is, if you could increase funding in just one area of the borough budget, what would it be? And which part of the budget you would take that money from? If overall spending remains the same, prioritizing one program means reducing another. Mr. Ludtke, 45 seconds are on the clock for you.
I think emergency services is probably the most important. I think those funds would probably have to come from subsidizing those entertainment venues. Big Dipper, Carlson Center, those should not be government run or subsidized in any way. But I think if we increased emergency services, give people a little more peace of mind, they could go about their day a little easier and live life a lot better.
All right, continuing seat D, Ms. Wilson.
If I was going to increase, it would be in the ambulance service. I would just want to make sure that there's a distinction between ambulance and fire service. Fire service areas, each area pays for those. We're borough-wide when it comes to ambulances. We are not paying our fair share at this point. Where would I take it from? Well, I think if we would increase our land sales and make sure all those that are on the borough that's supposed to go to individual landowners and put those up for sale, we'd have more than enough money to be able to pay for real ambulance service and real and be able to cover the whole borough, which we're not able to do right now because that land is supposed to go into private hands. Thank you.
Okay, continuing down the line with seat D, Mr. Crocker.
I believe that the area I would increase is in education. I believe we need to adequately fund our education in our school district. With the things that are going on with the pandemic, I believe that the school district will need adequate education funding. On top of that, that is an economic driver. As we see an increase in military personnel coming, they're also bringing their families with them. And so when they look at the layout of the school and the budget, they see that we are adequately funding education, they'll want to bring their families with them. In terms of reducing or where to take that, I believe exploring solid waste disposal and ensuring that we are being fiscally responsible in that area. Thank you.
Okay, so those were candidates for seat D. Moving on to seat E, Mr. Tacke.
Thank you. That's a very good question, and it's a really difficult one because a lot of the services that we have are already razor thin. everything is, I think that making sure that we do have an adequately funded education is very important. So possibly enhancing a little bit more education funding if it's necessary to be able to provide for students that are having to distance learn. So I'm sure that we need more tablets or more devices so that kids are actually still engaged with their education. Where to take it from? Public Works might be a little bit. We've taken a little bit of savings from there already. That might be some place we can look. And then there's a lot of little bits of parts and areas that we could go for. Solid waste disposal can have a little bit of a conversation as well. But yeah, it's pretty tight already, and it's a difficult question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tacke. Continuing on to CE, Assemblymember Cash.
Thank you. So if I was king for a day and I could direct money, I would direct it to facilities maintenance most likely, because as the buildings in the borough continue to get older and worn down, those issues are going to get worse and worse. And a lot of those buildings include school buildings. We have several school building roofs that are being done, parking lots, all that sort of thing. So that affects everything, not just education, but the overall budget of the borough. And as far as where to take it from, selling off land is an option. Cutting subsidies for places like the Carlson Center. I would really love to explore the idea of privatizing that. So that's where I think my priorities would be if I was king for a day.
Okay, so that was CE. Moving on to CH, Mr. Van Reenen.
So education has been one of the primary things in my agenda throughout this campaign, and that has included fully funding education. As Donald mentioned, a lot of the times families and businesses will base their decision to either remain in or move to this community on whether or not the local government values fully funded quality education. Now, we've got 5,600 people coming here as part of the F-35 program. They don't have to bring their families here, but we want them to. So they're going to look at whether or not we are providing, the ones that live off base are going to look at whether or not we're providing a sound quality educational system. As for where I'd cut it from, I said this in a past forum, as much as I like our parks and trails, if it came down to a choice between a trail and a teacher, I will always choose a teacher.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Van Reenen. Moving on to Assemblymember Lojewski.
So I have to say, the area that needs the funding the most might be counterintuitive, but it is going to be facilities maintenance. We've seen the problem if you defer maintenance year after year after year. You can, in the short run, feel good and have a good time and free up money for elsewhere in the budget. But then things like the Centennial Center gets shut down because it's unsafe, or Mary Saya gets shut down because it's unsafe and needs safety upgrades. And imagine, like, that's the tip of the iceberg that we're dealing with right now. Imagine when that happens to a major school and we're no longer having school sessions by Zoom, and suddenly teachers can't come to work, principals can't come to work, janitors can't get in the building to clean it, whatever. It's just shut down. That is a very realistic possibility if we don't plan wisely for our future. And I've taken very real steps to prevent that on the Assembly. As far as getting more money, Tammie Wilson is right. We can get it by land, and that also ups the tax cap. I'm out of time. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. As a reminder to the audience, if you have questions you would like to have answered of the candidates, please submit it in the chat box. And for our next question, seat D will start us off one last time. Ms. Wilson, Mr. Crocker, then Mr. Ludtke, followed by seat E, Assemblymember Cash, then Mr. Tacke, and seat H, Assemblymember Lojewski, then Mr. Van Reenen. You will have 60 seconds to respond. In response to the coronavirus pandemic, the Borough tasked the Economic Development Commission with assessing the immediate and long-term needs for the economic recovery in our community. They created the Interior Alaska COVID-19 Economic Impact and Recovery Plan, which is available online. The question is, have you seen any progress towards the stated goals? What resources are needed to ensure that our community recovers some of the economic ground that we lost in 2020?
Wow, I'm really glad to be first on this one.
Well, you have 60 seconds. Go ahead.
Thanks. So, I work downtown now, and I've really seen firsthand, how much the virus really has done, especially to small businesses. It is so hard to plan, whether you're a restaurant, you're a small business, on, you know, what your hours should be, how many people you should hire, because you just don't know what's going to happen. Having our children still mostly out of school really ties the hands on many of our parents making the choice of, do I leave them home alone, or do I run my business, or do both of them? I think the borough has done a great job thus far. I think we're just going to have to see, how do we open up a little sooner while keeping things safe? Because the longer that we keep things closed off, it's going to be harder to recover. And sadly enough, I think the businesses that have already closed most likely won't have that opportunity. But we have to get things back to normal so that we can grow, and people don't have to make the choice on whether to live here or not. That would really be sad.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Continuing with seat D, Mr. Crocker.
Yes, thank you for the question. In terms of the stated economic recovery goals, reading through that plan, what I see through there as a thread is this idea of collaboration. We are all in this pandemic together, and we need to work together in order to achieve that. So things like, long-term goals of removal of the Polaris site, or of completing the downtown plan. It needs to be a joint collaboration between small businesses, local government, nonprofits, and our residents. In terms of the resources needed to ensure, one thing I think that we really need to ensure is that we have transparency, specifically how COVID Relief Act money is being spent, and how we are being fiscally responsible with that money. I believe that through collaboration and through maximizing use of nonprofits, as well as our local government, both borough and city councils, we can come through this pandemic together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Last candidate with seat D, Mr. Ludtke.
Well, luckily, Alaska and the borough has been pretty rational with this coronavirus response, kind of leaving it up to the individuals and businesses. I think that's where it's best. Decisions can be made at the local level, but the borough should stay out of it. Businesses that I go to have taken precautions. They know what's best for them. There are other businesses that haven't taken any precautions, which I'm okay with too. If people don't like the way they're handling it, they don't need to shop there. So I think the borough should just stay out of it. It'd be nice if we could get schools open so parents don't have to worry about keeping their job or taking care of their kids. That's a big part of it. So yeah, in short, just keep government out of it. Businesses know best.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ludtke. Moving from seat D to seat E, Assemblymember Cash.
Thank you so much. So I'm trying to close my chat screen here so I can see. So I really do appreciate, one of the things that Mr. Ludtke said is that the community here has really worked together. Businesses have done their part to require masks where it's appropriate, put up shielding. I think the economic recovery is on a pretty good growth trajectory right now. I'm a general contractor, and I can tell you that I've been in business for 7 years, and this is the busiest summer I've had. And every contractor I know is the same way, which is a good thing for the economic growth of Fairbanks. There is still a long ways to go, and there are still a lot of people that are home, either with their kids or because the businesses are still closed or whatever. So I think the community needs to continue to work together. And like Mr. Ludtke said also, is that if there's a business that is requiring masks or whatever, just wear the mask. If you want to shop there. If you don't, then don't wear the mask and don't go. But we all need to work together, and we are going to get through this. It's recovering. We're recovering already as it is. And so I just appreciate everybody's cooperation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cash. Continuing with CE, Mr. Tacke.
All right, thank you very much. That's a great question. I have seen progress towards the economic recovery goals. Statedly, the biggest thing that we can do and implement to actually help enhance our economy is to make sure that we have safety precautions and guidelines, things that we tell our community that's the best way to reduce the spread of this virus. And also coming up with innovative ways that we do business, innovative ways that we can still conduct things that are going on. The biggest thing that we are seeing hit in our community is tourism. The whole tourism industry is going to be the hardest one that we're going to have recover. And the biggest thing to do that is implementing, most businesses do have this, masks required, but implementing safety measures that will make people feel safe to come back to our community and spend their dollars here and visit Alaska again. So as long as we do that, we create innovative ways and create safety precautions, we're going to continue to be on the positive trajectory that we're on.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tacke. Moving from seat E to seat H, Assemblymember Lojewski.
Right. So as members of the chamber, you folks are more aware than most people in the population that the creator of jobs in the community are businesses, in particular small businesses, but also medium and large businesses. So the very most important thing to do to get the economy rolling again is to go to work, and for businesses that have the resources to hire people and expand. There's no doubt about it. That's what it is. I'm in the visitor industry. I can tell you my visitor August over August versus last year was down 90%. This month doing quite a bit better, only down about 2/3 or so. And I'm considering myself to be lucky because that's Aurora visitation. If you were in the summer visitation industry, your summer got decimated by the lack of cruise ships. So it is really important to understand who creates jobs. It's a myth that government's the fundamental creator of any sort of job. It's a free enterprise, and small businessmen and small businesswomen that are the fundamental driver of our economy. And so they ought to be supported. The borough did pass through some CARES Act funding that's available. That's just a Band-Aid. My time's up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lojewski. We're moving on to Mr. Van Reenen for seat H.
So I think we need to put it in perspective. Our borough still has an unemployment rate of 10.4%. Businesses and workers have been devastated by this pandemic. So, and some of them might never reopen, and some folks are looking at long-term sustained unemployment. So we need to make sure we're spending our CARES Act dollars in a prudent, but also a streamlined and expeditious way that provides both businesses and workers with the immediate help they need. And that will also give them a strong economic springboard to our eventual recovery. We also need to make sure we're all being responsible and following the guidelines that will help us avoid future shutdowns, and it'll also help get our kids back to school in a safe environment.
Okay, thank you, candidates. You will have 60 seconds to answer this next question. This time, seat E will start, Mr. Tacke, followed by Assemblymember Cash. Next, seat H, Mr. Van Reenen, and then Assemblymember Lojewski, and then seat D, Mr. Crocker, Mr. Ludtke, and Ms. Wilson. Improving air quality has been a major focus for the borough for several years. The Clean Air Act requires that the state address our failure to meet the PM 2.5 health standard with an update to the serious state implementation plan that demonstrates 5% reductions in emissions each year. While all parties involved recognize the value to the community of solid fuels like wood, pellets, and coal, if federal air quality standards are not met, the resulting sanctions will negatively affect the economic future and quality of life in our community. The question is, please summarize your understanding of the air quality issue. What are the most important steps the borough can take to improve the situation? Mr. Tacke, you start with 60 seconds.
Thank you. So to summarize the air quality issue we have is basically we have too high of levels of PM 2.5 in the air that is not meeting the EPA standard. And we have implemented a lot of different plans in the past and have created some rules and regulations on limiting when people can burn wood and when they can't, and it has not been as successful as we have hoped. And so the levels are still high. Other ways that we can make, I think another huge factor would be as we finish the interior gas utility program and getting people hooked up, we'll have a huge decrease in the amount of PM 2.5 that's the result of diesel oil, heating oil precipitants, and also by actually using retrofitters. I cannot think of the name right now, but basically the devices that we install after, electrostatic precipitators, have that installed into different wood burning devices. It'll actually help reduce the level of PM 2.5, and we could possibly get down to our 5% reductions.
Okay, continuing with seat E, Assemblymember Cash.
Thank you. So yes, that's exactly where we're at. The EPA has set out guidelines for PM 2.5 particulate matter, and we are above that, and we've been above that for quite a while. A lot of that is because of the geographic region we're in. We're in a bowl, and so when inversion happens, all the exhaust from vehicles and from houses and from factories or whatever, it hangs out down where you can breathe it, and it's unhealthy. Progress has been made, a significant amount of progress. And if you notice, business is also making it strides to change that. If you ever drive down Phillips Field Road, you'll see a structure being built and about 100 cords of wood stacked there. And that is a private business that is building a kiln to dry firewood. So that way people who choose to burn firewood like myself, we can get dry firewood. And as far as electrostatic precipitators, that is being tested. It hasn't been approved for the EPA's certifications so that we can install those and actually count the improvement. But we all just need to continue to work better, work closer together with private business and the borough to collaborate on ways to reduce emissions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Assemblymember Cash. Moving on to seat H, Mr. Van Reenen.
So, you know, in 2018, we ceded our autonomy to be able to deal with this issue to Juneau. And I'm not going to question the wisdom of that decision, but I do know it took a lot of the control. It took a lot of the enforcement control out of our hands. So the only thing we really can continue to do is to incentivize changing out solid fuel burning sources. I do think we've made a bit of progress. You know, we're now a utility offer in the way of natural gas. It's localized and there's room for expansion. I think we can look more into that. But I am, you know, I saw a report out the other day that we can reach our goals within the next 4 years. I'm optimistic, but also, you know, I think it needs, this is a priority for the borough. I mean, I said in an interview once, it will always be reprehensible to me that we have areas of the borough where kids cannot play outside at recess pre-pandemic, and when we finally do go back.
Okay, we need to move on. Continuing with seat H, Assemblymember Lojewski.
Right, so as some other people are mentioning, PM 2.5 is very small particulate that gets into the air. It's microscopic. You can't see it, you can't taste it, you can't smell it, whatever. And it's been significantly correlated with negative health impacts for people who have a long-term exposure to it. So it's really unfortunate, but we do have high levels above EPA air quality standards. And if we continue to stay above them, as the moderator mentioned, we're going to have negative impacts on us. So the reality is, it's better to work with the state and go with their plan. I don't like everything that's in it. In fact, I don't like a lot that's in it because a lot of it is curtailing personal freedoms, and that's very negative. But if you look at it compared to the alternative, it is far better than the alternative of letting the EPA do what it wants to do. Also, ESPs, as people mentioned, is a great technology that has a significant role. The IGU has a significant role. I was on the board of directors for the 3 years. We've had a project that I was involved with back on the board that just came to fruition this summer, and that's the big storage tank. Now, the extra production from the Titan facility can be liquefied and brought up, and now we can gasify the lines that we've had built out for several years. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to seat D, Mr. Crocker.
Thank you. So not much to add in terms of the understanding the air quality issue that hasn't been stated already. But what I will say, as Mr. Lojewski mentioned, PM 2.5, the smart particulates, they are a health concern. So this is not just an environmental concern, but this is a health concern. And what this will be impacting is on some of our most vulnerable communities, specifically homeless and near homeless populations that are exposed to PM 2.5 and don't have the healthcare to be able to resolve a lot of those serious health concerns that can result from that, specifically respiratory issues. And we are in a respiratory pandemic right now. And so this is something that needs to be definitely resolved and reduce that that number by 5%. And so the natural gas changeover is a strong idea from in supporting IGU. In that, but I believe it's a Band-Aid. It is switching one fossil fuel to another. And so also the borough needs to take the long view of exploring other renewable sources as well in order to sustain our health of the environment and people for the long term. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crocker. Continuing with seat D, Mr. Ludtke.
Well, unfortunately, something that no one chooses to mention or talk about is the U.S. Constitution does not allow the federal government to have any authority over our air quality up here. I think the problem is the air in the wintertime, it gets stuck in that bowl that was mentioned. So if we really want to fix our air quality, keep it at the state level, the borough level, I don't think either one of those has the authority to tell anyone what they can or can't burn. But if we want to push for better air, we should be begging private companies to bring nuclear power up here and invest in a natural gas line.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ludtke. Moving on to still a seat D, Ms. Wilson.
Thank you. I am so proud of our community. I hear like doom and gloom and all this, but we have come so far. I mean, when was the last time we actually got a date that we're going to be able to meet, you know, this attainment number? And the reason is because community got involved. It's now we're going to have a kiln, so I'll have more dry wood that's going to be available. Hopefully it'll be affordable as well. You know, we are trying the ESPs. I was part of that project of having some tests done actually in chimneys here in North Pole. You know, but at the end of the day, this is all about energy. It's always been about the cost of energy and being able to afford to be able to live in your home, you know, in the best way that you know how to. But, you know, coming down and finding someone and thinking you're going to get a change versus the community be part of the solution is, I think, where we went wrong at the beginning. And now we're coming together, both sides, saying we can solve this in our own community, in our own way. We don't need outside sources telling us what to do because we live here and we know what's best. And 4 years, that's not far to come into compliance. I think it's great, and I'm so proud of everybody.
Okay, thank you, candidates. We will now move into a rapid fire round of yes/no questions. You should have your red and green cards in front of you. For our colorblind friends, the green card has a check mark to indicate yes, and the red card has an X to indicate no. If you don't have your cards, please indicate your answer using a thumbs up or a thumbs down. For each question, please hold up the card that corresponds with your answer and keep it up until all candidates have responded. First, we'll start with a warm-up question. This one's a softball. During the coronavirus closures earlier this year, did you do any of the following common lockdown activities? Bake bread, complete a puzzle, or cut your own hair? Please keep them up. Okay. Remember to keep your thumbs up too if you're doing thumbs. Oh, and Chris is frozen. Okay. All right. So now we're ready to start the rapid fire questions. Have you attended a meeting of the Borough Assembly within the last year? Okay. Are the snow removal needs of businesses and residents of the borough currently being met? Okay. Is the current borough zoning code adequately serving the needs of borough property owners? Should the borough actively support resource development on the North Slope and elsewhere in Alaska as an economic driver for our region? All right. And finally, the Fair Share Act, a ballot initiative which will appear on the November 3rd general election ballot, would increase the state tax rate on oil production and discourage future investment by oil companies in Alaska. Would you encourage someone listening today to vote for this initiative? All right, thank you. We have 3 more prepared questions for the candidates. Candidates, you will have 60 seconds to respond to the next question. We will start with seat E, Assemblymember Cash, and then Mr. Tacke, followed by seat H, Assemblymember Lojewski, and then Mr. Van Reenen. And finally, seat D, Mr. Van Reenen, Ms. Wilson, and then Mr. Crocker. I have Mr. Van Reenen in here twice, so let's see how the order actually goes. Sorry about that. In 2019, the borough instituted a new capital improvement program, or CIP, to provide a transparent process for evaluation, prioritization, funding, and construction of borough infrastructure such as buildings, parks, and schools. This allows effective forward planning of construction for both the borough and local contractors who will bid on those projects. The borough recently completed the first round of project applications from the community, review by borough staff and the assembly, and incorporation into a new 10-year plan. The question is, what are your opinions of the KIP? What have you observed so far about this process? And to start things off, Assemblymember Cash, you have 60 seconds.
Thank you. That's a great question. The capital improvement plan it's a really great in concept, and I'm really glad that we had it. Previously, there was no real plan on how things were going to be addressed other than what came up first or what somebody decided they wanted to move forward with. It's also great because we can plan our money out years out. My opinion on that is that there's a number of things on there that are new construction, new projects, and the primary funding source for that program is the facilities maintenance reserve. And if you notice, the word in there in the middle is called maintenance. My opinion is that most of the money from that, all of the money, if possible, of the facilities maintenance reserve would go towards facilities maintenance, not constructing new buildings. The issues that we have with the capital improvement plan that I have is that a lot of those projects are newer construction that money, I believe, is not best used for. I'm out of time. Thank you.
All right, continuing with CE is Mr. Tacke.
Yeah, I've actually really enjoyed this program. I saw it come to fruition when I was actually on the assembly. Mayor Ward came up with a great idea. It actually took the same planning procedures that we had utilized in fast planning, previously FMATs, and how you can actually plan things out in advance for several years at a time. You can add projects and remove projects. It also brings in a lot of different community support. Community members get to supply their ideas for projects. You can go through a vetting process, and then ultimately the assembly will get to choose what's on there and what's not on there. Facility maintenance is a very important thing. I agree that that's a major factor in having that on the KIP, but it's also important to know that sometimes you cannot just continue to maintain a completely dilapidated building when you can't just keep putting Band-Aids on it. So having new projects on there and new projects that can actually be a very good addition for our community is a good thing. So I really enjoy this program, and I'm happy that the mayor pushed it forward. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tacke. We'll move on to seat H now with Assemblymember Lojewski.
Okay, so the mayor asked me, and we directly worked together and sponsored the KIP ordinance. It was a huge step forward. It's still teething. It does have significant issues that need to be improved, and especially now that we've had some experience, we can move forward and address those. But first, the funding source for it, I've been a champion of. I wrote the ordinance that mandated that 7% of borough revenue needs to be saved into the FMR on an annual basis, just like we all save money for retirement, so one day we can stop working. That number, I also wrote the ordinance to up that to 9%. That's essentially exclusively the only funding source for the KIP. Now, the problems with the KIP, it had been alluded to already. Sometimes there are new businesses or new buildings and things on there that would enlarge government. That is a problem. The KIP needs to prioritize maintenance. And I will say, I need to be a little more finessed on what new means. If you were to buy a $20,000 car, run it into the ground over 5 or 10 years, it's worn out, and you replace it with another new $20,000 car, in my mind, that's not, I mean, technically it's a new car, but you just recapitalize your old asset. You're not increasing your footprint. So if we're replacing a worn out building with a new one, that's absolutely fine and acceptable use. Thank you.
All right, continuing with seat H, Mr. Van Reenen.
I'm a supporter of the KIP. I wish Aaron had voted for it. It represents much needed updates to our basic infrastructure like schools, school traffic safety, our community center, and our public library at a time when Fairbanks is about to see an influx of 5,600 new people through the F-35 program. Upgrades like these open up avenues to not only accommodating more people, but to resident retention and growing our economy at a time of severe economic contraction. The KIP is also a jobs creator for some of the same businesses represented by the chamber and who are listening in today. So of course I support that.
All right, so that was seat H. Moving on to seat D, Mr. Ludtke.
Yeah, I think on the surface, it's a good idea for buildings that serve the proper role of government. Nobody likes to have the conversation about all of the buildings under borough control and funding that aren't the role of government. So entertainment venues being subsidized, there's probably a lot that I don't know about. But overall, yeah, I think it's good. I think they need to have a very strict definition of capital improvement. You can't be building new things with funding that's supposed to be just improving. At a certain point, it was mentioned that a building outlives its usefulness and it just has to be torn down. So that should be addressed. But I think the definition needs to be very strict on where they're allowed to spend it.
Okay, continuing with seat D, it's Ms. Wilson.
Can you hear me? I had to switch to phone. My computer went ballistic.
Yes, we can hear you. You got back just in time.
Okay, thank you. So on the capital improvement plan, I think it was something that I just really can't believe we never had before. I mean, how do you have all these buildings and not actually have a plan? But I think we need to remember that it's all in the definition, and also it's a living document, meaning that we're going to constantly see it changing depending upon what the demands of the community are. But I think one part that's missing from the conversation, the part that I got to hear, is, you know, how many of the buildings can we seriously keep? You know, especially as we look at our schools and the population has dropped significantly. Are there schools that are worth fixing anymore, or do we consolidate our schools and our children so that, you know, we don't have all this maintenance to go with it? But it's making choices on both ways. But I think the mayor, you know, putting this forward will give us a plan that we have long needed. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wilson. And moving on to seat D, Mr. Crocker.
Yes, thank you. This is a great question. Having watched and listened to discussions on the KIP, I've been overly impressed with the way the Borough Assembly has handled this project. One thing I absolutely love about it is that it involves both collaboration with local businesses as well as the local government, and also transparency. And it's very clear what is being used, the money that the borough collects, what's being used in terms of improving our quality of buildings. One thing that I would like to see, and I would definitely push for, is that this does give us an opportunity to also explore more energy efficient buildings as we start to improve, and allows us to innovate and as we improve our buildings as well. And so I absolutely agree with Mr. Tacke in that we do need to also explore and ensure that the buildings we are fixing are fixable, or if not, looking to build new and improved facilities. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, candidates. All right, audience, this is your final reminder. If you have a question you would like to have asked, please submit it in the chat box now, or so that way it's under consideration by the chamber staff. Now moving on into our next question. For this question, you'll have 45 seconds to respond. Seat H will answer first, Mr. Van Reenen, followed by Assembly Member Lojewski. Next, seat D, Ms. Wilson, Mr. Crocker, and Mr. Ludtke. Followed by seat E, Mr. Tacke, and Assembly Member Cash. The question is, how would you describe the borough's current support for our local military installations? Is there anything that you would change? And Mr. Van Reenen, will start you with your 45-second response.
I kind of feel like this is a continuation of the KIP question, because that in part directly supports the service members on those military installations who may choose to live off base and send their families to schools off base. I've done work on base to help meet the needs of our military community, whether it was installing windows or glass in military facilities or paving roads and parking lots on base. We also need to look into, and I know the borough has already started down this path, but we need to continue looking into the use of federal grants to explore further development in the interior to accommodate our new community members. Beyond that, this also goes back to fully funding education. Like I said before, those service members don't have to bring their families here. They can choose to, and we want them to.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Van Reenen. Continuing with seat H, Assembly Member Lojewski.
Okay, well, to start, I need to address something that my opponent referenced in the last question. He point blank lied to you about my record. I'm very sorry about that. I did sponsor the capital improvement plan. I voted to put it on the books. And when it came to the final product to approve it and the funding package, although I disagreed with some of the output, I voted for it. And I used the same type of logic that I just explained to you now on the record. It's right there on the Borough website. So I'm very sorry about that. That way the distortion of the record. To answer your question, I do. Hey, I didn't interrupt you when you lied about me. You don't need to be interrupting me. I fully support the military, and it's great that we were able to use the Borough to help secure the F-35s to the community. I'm not going to pretend the Borough was alone. There was a massive community effort that came together that made that happen, and I think the Borough has a role to play like that in the future should a similar situation arise. God bless the United States.
All right, moving on from seat H and on to seat D, Ms. Wilson.
We have one of the best military towns, I think, anywhere in the U.S. I'd put us up against anybody, from the Tiger team that was put together many years ago to where it brings in the state, the borough, the federal government. Everybody gets together to be able to talk about the projects that need to be supported, what's needed. I was able to go down for a few days and see the F-35s actually being built and got to sign, the bulkhead, which will be something I will never forget. But the other part I will never forget is really having that time one-on-one to talk to members of the military and understanding that when they move so often, being able to go in and help them understand what we have in our community and how to get more involved, because they're only here for a short time, is very important to them. And we got to see some towns in Arizona on how they did that hands-on and brought things to the military that they couldn't just buy.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Wilson. We're on to seat D, Mr. Crocker.
Yes, thank you so much. So I absolutely am in support of especially the new folks that are coming into our community. We need to ensure that we have spaces that allow to and have a good quality of life. And so ensuring that our facilities, like the Carlson Center, like the downtown, is accessible so that families can go out, or individual military members can go out. The work that's been done by the military installations to improve quality of life and engage in the community is absolutely essential, and I absolutely love it. So continuing that partnership is going to be essential. I think also connecting military members and families with opportunities for becoming local business owners or being involved in the university as a student is going to be a great addition as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crocker. On to Mr. Ludtke.
Yeah, I've seen great things from the borough. I'd like to talk more about the private businesses side of things and the private citizens. They support the military more than I've seen anywhere else. That's more important. The borough can kind of vote to verbally support them. I don't know about facilities and stuff like that. Schools obviously are good for the kids coming in from these military installations. But as far as financial support or anything like that, I don't really think the borough needs to. The private citizens would take care of them by hiring them and supporting their kids.
Okay, moving on from seat D into seat E, Mr. Tacke.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, the relationship that we've had with the military installations has been quite positive. There's always an open line of communication between the mayors and the commanders. And so maintaining that and asking the needs that they need from us to be able to continue to have a positive relationship is always the biggest thing, is having open communication. Obviously, creating a good education system for service members to want to bring their families here to be educated. And also, the other thing would have been, I just had it at the tip of my tongue, hold on. It was making sure that we're working on cleaning up our air. The PM 2.5 level has actually been a pretty significant factor in whether or not they were considering bringing F-35s here. And the same deal with maintaining the rest of the installations here, is keeping a clean air for our community and for the installations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tacke. And seat E, Assemblymember Cash.
Thank you. This is a great question. This is probably my favorite one so far. I'm a veteran, so support of the military is paramount to me. I think that this community is wonderful in our support of the military. Alaska has one of the highest rates of military retirement in the country. So more people retire from the military and either move here or stay here than any other state in the country. And that's for a reason. I think I'm going to use this opportunity to mention something that doesn't get talked about enough. 22 U.S. veterans take their own life every day in this country. And so as a community, what we need to do to the veterans, for the veterans in this community, is to let them know that we support them. We support them as they get their own businesses. Many of you chamber members are veterans. And so we need to support the veterans in our community and let them know that they're heard, especially in this time when a lot of them may.
Okay, we need to move on. This is our final prepared question. You will have 60 seconds to respond, and seat H will begin. Assemblymember Lojewski and Mr. Van Reenen. Then seat D, Mr. Crocker, Mr. Ludtke, and Ms. Wilson. And finally, Assemblymember Cash and Mr. Tacke. As our population grows and access to all sorts of packaged products becomes easier and cheaper, the waste disposal needs of Fairbanks keep growing. The borough invests money into diverting some waste through recycling, but recycling only handles about 1% of waste we generate as a community. The question is, are the borough's landfill, transfer site, and recycling efforts being balanced in a way that efficiently addresses our waste disposal needs? Assemblymember Lojewski, you have 60 seconds to respond.
So first, since this is the final prepared question, I wanted to let folks know that I was up till 6 a.m. last night. That's my normal schedule when I'm providing Aurora tours for folks outside and I'm creating jobs in the community. So I'm now feeling awake, and if I didn't answer any questions to your satisfaction, want to learn more, my number is 978-1766. Feel free to call me after the meeting and I'll be happy to flesh out those ideas. Now, next to the actual borough landfill. By the way, the manager doesn't like to call it a dump. He finds that word to be a little bit offensive, but the actual landfill, they're running a great job with that operation. They're able to plan ahead, see how much material they need to put into the ground, cover it up, make sure it doesn't blow away, and they're just doing an absolutely top-notch professional job there. I think kind of the bigger issue we have in the borough, as far as non-area-wide solid waste collection district, is going to be our transfer sites. And our transfer sites have been having issues with the amount of hours they're open, with trash being left around, with particular people hanging around them, like it's sort of becoming their friend. I've heard stories of that this summer, and that's an issue we really need to think about and figure out how to deal with. I don't have a perfect solution for you now, but I'm willing to listen.
Okay, and continuing with seat H is Mr. Van Reenen.
Hey, Tyler, can I respond briefly to being called a liar?
You have 60 seconds.
Okay, because before you call someone a liar, make sure that you can't search that and verify that information on the Newsminer's own website. You did, in fact, vote against the kit. You said it was too much fluff. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't consider schools and traffic safety improvements at schools fluff. What I do consider fluff is what you tried to do 2 days later, which was use taxpayer money to buy the Christopher McCandless death bus. I consider that fluff. So, Aaron, you call me a liar, but make sure that it can't be verified on the Newsminer's own website. As for the dumps are a mess. We need to figure that out.
Okay, moving
on. All my time by now.
Oh, all right, moving on to seat D, Mr. Crocker.
Yes, thank you for the question. So I believe that the needs are for the landfill and the transfer site. I believe that they do need to be explored and reevaluated in terms of solid waste disposal. But I'd like to focus specifically on recycling efforts. I don't believe that we have the ability to properly recycle. I believe that we have a current recycling baler that was originally not suited for the amount that we actually have in terms of recyclable goods. I think looking at a long-term investment into appropriate baler can help then reduce, it will bring in some revenue from those recycling efforts. If you look at how much waste we have in tonnage and compared to MATS2 and how much they're able to recycle at this time because they're properly set up for that recycling, it's baffling. And so I would like to explore how to improve recycling efforts here in the borough. Thank you.
Okay, continuing with seat D, Mr. Ludtke.
So lately, from what I've seen at the transfer sites, it's kind of hit or miss. One day I show up and they look really good, clean, put together and all that. The next day I show up and it doesn't look so great. So there could be more work to be done on that. So as it stands right now, 50-50 with me. But something that nobody wants to talk about is trash collection a proper role of government? I'm not sure if it's ever been explored to privatize it. I know we're really spaced out here. Maybe just closer to Fairbanks could be privatized. But if we could at least explore that option, I think private businesses do a much better job, more efficient, more cost effective. And if we do that, we're not forcing anyone to pay for stuff they don't use or pay for services they don't use.
Thank you. Continuing with seat D, Ms. Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. A few years ago when I was knocking on doors, I have to share this story, and this gentleman came out a little gruff and he wanted to show me the view from his backyard. I was like, sure, why not? We walked to the backyard and he goes, look at my mountains. Well, he could no longer see the real mountains. The mountain now was the landfill. You know, so that was pretty sad for that whole area to actually have built an area to you could see real mountains, and now that you can't. I just want to remind everybody that it is a user's fee. So we pay to use the landfill. We use to be able to put it. We had a question earlier where someone said that, you know, they would take money away from that to pay for schools. You can't do that. It's a user fee. You know, I was glad to see that we could use our transfer sites again 24/7. That was really a hardship for a lot of people because during the summer, you know, we work all sorts of hours being able to do that. The question with the recycling put into that, does it all balance out? Do we get a big enough bang for our dollar, or is there ways if we need to adjust those types of things? But right now it is a user fee. Maybe it could be privatized because we know how much money we put into it. I think all options should be put on the table.
Okay, now moving into seat E, Assembly Member Cash.
Thank you. So last year when I ran for office, by far the biggest comment I got from everybody was that they were frustrated by the transfer sites. It actually took me off guard. I did not expect there to be that much passion behind the transfer sites. I know it's an issue. I know some people love the reuse areas. Other people think it's a waste. But believe it or not, for everybody who's listening, many of you probably understand it, that the transfer sites and the landfill are huge issues to the people in Fairbanks because it really does affect your day-to-day life where you take your trash. As far as the landfill, I think it's doing a wonderful job, the group out there. But as far as recycling goes, one of the biggest holdups with recycling in Fairbanks is the ability to get those goods out somewhere where they can actually be made into something else. We have no way to get them somewhere. Anchorage has a better opportunity with recycling because they have ways to get that product either to Japan or wherever else it's going to be recycled, and we just don't have that opportunity here. So we're being held back in that way.
All right, and also with seat E, Mr. Tacke.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a very complicated question. Obviously, I say Bob Jordan and everyone at the landfill is doing a very good job. It's a very complicated issue, especially determining how many cells you need at what rate you're actually accumulating tonnage of waste. And then also the landfills or the transfer sites is a whole nother situation. The balance between whether or not we were going to go with having attendance there and limited hours, or whether we're going to have 2 additional employees to do code enforcement. I mean, I've gone there and I've seen it look really nice certain days, and then other days it looks really bad. And it makes me wonder whether or not what the code enforcement officers are doing and if that was a proper substitution. So that there is a lot of things that we need to look at in that regard. And then the recycling center, that's another thing. It had high hopes and having a lot of people come and bring a lot of their recycled goods to the recycling center. But we don't have any place to take it, like Jimmy John said. So we're actually needing to figure out whether or not we need to continue that, or with what other things we need to do to reform it to be able to provide more options of where to take our recycled goods. It's not a perfect system, but is definitely, there is user fees associated with it, but reducing that cost can reduce the property taxes for the additional property taxes that are put on people in other parts of the area in the borough. That's all I got. Thanks.
Okay, now we are taking a few audience questions. So candidates, you will have 60 seconds to respond to the first question that I now have on a fancy little card. The order will be Mr. Crocker, Mr. Ludtke, Miss Wilson with seat D, and then on to seat, oh, you know what? I'm supposed to just go through these, sorry. So here's the question. Last year, the mayor and assembly used approximately $7 million from a settlement to supplement the budget. Without that funding, how do you think the budget should be adjusted this year? Starting with seat D, Mr. Crocker.
Thank you. We are going to be expecting budget cuts, for the next several years, because of the pandemic, because of state revenues, a lot of different reasons. And so I think my experience in budgeting, running the UAF pub, working with the bread line, and overseeing those budgets to ensure that we can still provide essential services. I believe that that working in partnerships and collaborations is absolutely essential. So specifically utilizing nonprofits to ensure that essential services are still covered, and pairing with them so that we can ensure that those essential services for all of our communities are still being met and we meeting the needs of our community members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crocker. Continuing with seat D, Mr. Ludtke.
Yeah, I've addressed a few things that I would like to cut that are not essential services. If people need help, I trust that the citizens of the borough will step up. Private businesses are great at stepping up and doing charity, churches, neighbors, friends, family, all that stuff. So budget cuts, they're coming, whether we like it or not. So yeah, I'd go that route. I don't think it's any time to increase taxes. People are struggling enough as it is. So without that 7 million, yeah, cuts are going to happen.
Okay, and also a seat D, Miss Wilson.
Well, first of all, I think the borough should stop watching the state and on how to balance their budget, because that's been their tendency to take one-time funding and put it into their budget and say, oh, I'm balanced. No, we're now $7 million in the hole going into this next year, in a year where we're already going to have a lot of revenue loss because, as some people said, tourism has left. There's a lot of businesses that have left. So I think you're going to have to fill more than 7 million because you also have the tax cap. But how do we rebound off of that? Really, it's bringing more business in. It's being friendly to those who want to come in. How do we get our tourism back? Is there a way we can incentivize? How do we work with the visitors group to say, okay, we have the pandemic going on. How do we get business going again? Because, at the end of the day, if we don't have a prosperous economic growth going on, then it's going to fall back to the residents who are already in stress, much less our small businesses. So, they didn't do us any favors, that's for sure.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wilson. On to seat E with Assemblymember Cash.
Thank you. So one thing that question kind of leaves out is that we actually went into this budget cycle $13 million higher than where we ended. The mayor's proposed budget was $13 million higher. The pandemic happened, and that was motivation for everybody on the assembly and the mayor to cut where as much as they were willing, I should say. We were able to cut $6 million out of the budget, and then the mayor proposed using that $7 million windfall to offset the rest so that we didn't have to raise the mill rate. So the mill rate stayed the same as last year. However, most people's taxes still went up because your property's values go up every year, right? So next year with this $7 million shortfall, we're not going to have a windfall to come in and fall back on. So we're going to have really difficult decisions made to cut in areas where many people haven't wanted to cut. Either that, or we're going to have a mill rate increase substantially. Also, in October 6th, vote yes on the municipal election for the tax cap. Otherwise, your mill rate's going to go through the roof.
Okay, thank you, Assemblymember Cash. Also, seat E, Mr. Tacke.
That's a pretty good question. There's a lot of different areas in which you might want to take looks at how we can save some money. Overall, the total expenditures we have is about $172 million for our budget, which the $7 million cut would be about 4% if you did it all across the entire board. That would not be the best way to go for it. Coming up with other areas that you like, incentivizing businesses to come in here, selling more of our own land to add it to the tax rolls would be another way that we can increase our revenues to help compensate for that. Also, making sure that we're incentivizing businesses, like helping work with the tourist industry on how to get more people in, because we are going to have a bigger hit with the lack of a hotel motel tax, bed tax. It will be a bit of a decrease. But then also we have lapses each year. There's a bit of a lapse that we could utilize, and also a little bit of a fund balance to help offset that for a hard hit year. So I think there's a lot of different areas that we can take a lot of little bits that won't have such a one large impact in one particular department.
Okay, and now on to seat H with Assemblymember Lojewski.
Sure. So I'd like to apologize once again. My opponent continues to say things that are untrue, and I need to address the first. He accused me of trying to purchase the Stampede bus with taxpayer funds. That's not true. The city of Fairbanks unanimously passed a resolution to ask it to come to Fairbanks. I authored a resolution offering to house it for the state of Alaska at Pioneer Park. Even if we had spent money, which we weren't going to, on it, the increase in bed tax dollars from people coming to see it, and I know we're not that interested in it, but other people in the lower 48 are, would have more than offset. Second, I also had a conversation with Corrine, the canvas, and she told me that she's raising money, and it's absolutely credible because she's a big focal point for people who are interested in that bus, that she's raising money, and it's her personal goal that not a penny of Alaska taxpayer dollars, whether it be local or state, be spent on that bus. She doesn't want that to be a burden on any local taxpayer. We also could have gone into partnership with the Fountainhead Museum and or the state of Alaska. And as it turns out with the Museum of the North, there's all sorts of avenues to use that as a good asset for the community without paying money. For the last bit of it, in 5 seconds, there were lots of procedural votes on the KIP. I voted no on a lot of procedural votes because I didn't like the output. I voted yes where the rubber meets the road on the funding for the KIP, and I authored it. Thank you.
Okay, moving on, also for seat H, Mr. Van Reenen.
I'm just going to say this, 3 words. When he says something, all you have to do, look it up. That's all you have to do. You did try to use taxpayer dollars to buy the McCandless bus. There's a Newsminer article on it. I read the news every day. Now, enough with that. With regard to budgeting, I have my own budgeting experience as a co-owner of a small business that included looking over quarterly and year-end P&L reports and budgeting for next year. This included ensuring we're maintaining and finding room to grow our workforce. Equally as important is my own family's budget. My wife and I, like families listening, I've had the dining table discussions about how we're going to make it through winter with a growing family. I think my priorities are making sure we're building an economy that has a spot at the table for all hardworking Fairbanksans. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that is our audience questions. And to conclude today's forum, we will give each candidate 60 seconds to give closing remarks. We will start with seat E, Mr. Tacke and Assemblymember Cash, and then seat H, Mr. Van Reenen and Assemblymember Lojewski. And finally, seat D, Mr. Crocker, Mr. Ludtke, and Ms. Wilson. So to start off with 60 seconds, seat E, Mr. Tacke.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for having us here and giving us the opportunity to give you our positions and where we're coming from. Again, I just want to mention who I am and what I do. I always believe in people's individual freedoms. I'm a small business owner and want to push for people to start and grow their own businesses, regardless of what ever their business is. And if I may disagree with it or not, and it might not be in my moral wheelhouse, I'll let everyone try to do what they want if it's legal and if it's okay. I have 2 children who are in the public school system, so I actually see the rubber hitting the road with the pandemic. And I am always open to anyone's facts and ideas. I'm an open book. My phone number is 907-978-7647. Feel free to call or text me to ask questions. I like to hear every side of every argument and I'll bring the most pragmatic approach to every issue that is brought in front of the Borough Assembly, be it a resolution or an ordinance. I hear every side, and I'll bring the most factual thing that I can do that's best for our community.
Okay, continuing with seat E, Assemblymember Cash.
Thank you so much. I want to thank the Chamber for hosting this. It's always probably the most attended forum every year, or with candidates. And I really appreciate everybody who is logged on to YouTube to watch this. This is very important that you are involved and doing the research to find out what candidate you want to support. Throughout this conversation, you guys have heard different points of view on different things. What I can tell you about myself is that I look at everything with a certain set of philosophies, and that is lower taxes, more property rights, and less burdensome regulation. And if that's something that you agree with, if those are the philosophies that you share, I'd appreciate your vote on October 6th. And I hope that you guys all have a wonderful week. Thank you.
Okay, and now moving on to seat H, Mr. Van Reenen.
Judgment matters. Representation matters. I was the only candidate in the race for seat H to oppose the budget vetoes that would have devastated our economy. I wasn't willing to just sit back and let it play out. Doing so would have meant hundreds of jobs lost in the interior, thousands of Fairbanksans losing healthcare benefits. It would have meant teacher pink slips and crowded classrooms, and elders facing rate hikes and evictions from pioneer homes. Imagine if Fairbanks had been willing to just sit back and let that play out. The hit we would have endured followed the next year by a pandemic that would have beaten us down even further. But Fairbanksans are fighters. We don't take anything lying down or sitting back. Neither should our elected representatives. If you want representation that listens to you, that fights for you, that's consistent and committed to the job, then I'm asking for your vote now and on October 6th. Thank you, and thank you for the Chamber for having me.
Okay, also with seat H, Assemblymember Lojewski.
Hi, folks. Thanks for your consideration. Thanks for coming to the debate. I don't have a memorized scripture, and I'm not going to robotically repeat it. I'm just speaking from the heart. I don't have those bullet points and everything. But the reason why you should consider voting for me is understand that we're running for assembly here. We're not running for state house. And what we're doing is we're maintaining and we're managing this government that is the borough government of the Fairbanks North Star Borough. We're also passing code and whatnot and setting local policy. When it comes to that, when I came to the assembly, we weren't saving any money for our buildings. The plan was to beg the state for money. The state no longer has money to do that. It's not Dunleavy's fault. It's not Governor Walker's fault. It's the reality of the economics of the oil industry. And so I was able to pass a resolution for the first time ever to have a process to regularly save money so that we can take care of our buildings locally and not watch them fall down. 7%, up that to 9%. That's moving forward. I authored the KIP with the mayor so we can spend that money as efficiently as possible to keep those buildings going. There's so much more yet to do. I'm a problem solver. I've got a proven record. And if you want to be a part of that and you want me to continue to work in that direction, please vote for me for Borough Assembly for 3 more years. Thank you.
Okay, and now moving on to seat D, Mr. Crocker.
Yes, I'd like to thank the Chamber for inviting us all for this lively discussion. And also to those of you that are watching, thank you for being involved and engaged in local government. So I am Donald Crocker. I'm running for Borough Assembly seat D. My priorities are adequate education and environmentally conscious decision making. I haven't had a chance to speak on that. One thing I will say is that I think engaging in the Joint Climate Change Task Force is going to be absolutely essential moving forward immediately, as we have seen what climate change has done on the West Coast. That mitigation plan will help us in terms of increasing our Moody rating, so we can get a better interest rate on our school bonds as well. I believe in collaboration. I believe in open communication. Assemblymember Cash said you heard a lot of different things, but in the end, to get through this pandemic, we're going to need to work together. I have a record of working strong with a wide array of people. I encourage everyone to go vote, especially that drive-through voting. Where else in the state can you get a cup of coffee, some Thai food, and then do your civic duty to vote? So thank you very much.
Okay, and continuing next to seat D is Mr. Ludtke.
So for this election, I just got to say I will be voting for Tammie Wilson. I think we need to have the discussion about what the proper role of government is. Nobody wants to cut services and all that stuff, but I don't need services from the government. I trust friends and family and private businesses to step up and make sure this community is successful. So the proper role of government, in my view, is preserving and defending negative rights. It's never talked about, but we need to have the discussion now. Yeah, I'll be voting for Tammie Wilson, but I'm not going anywhere. You're going to get sick of me.
Okay, and continuing with seat D is Ms. Wilson.
Thank you to the chamber and to everybody who took their time out today, and thank you, Mr. Ludtke, for your support. And I'm glad you're not going to go away. We need more people being involved in our government. You know, we can't depend on the state anymore for funding, and that's where we've kind of gotten lopsided here. We need to get the land that was given to the state, to the borough, into private hands. That's why it was given to the borough in the first place. We need to incentivize the businesses to come here and help those be able to maintain during this virus is continuing. We need affordable energy. That's what ties everything together. But the biggest part of the reason I'm running is because decisions have to be made by the community. We are a community, whether we're in a pandemic or not. How things work is the input that we get from everyday citizens. And so if you ever have any questions, please give me a call at 590-7602. Like you know, I'm a parent, I'm a grandmother, and it's all about being able to make sure that they can stay here, be educated here, and never have to go because our costs have gotten too much or our regulations too stringent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, candidates. Before we wrap up the forum, we have a quick message from one of our political forum sponsors, the Oil and Gas Association.
Hi, my name is Uriah Nellycook. I work for the Arctic Slope Regional Corporation. We're a member of the Oil and Gas Association. On November 3rd, Alaskans will be asked to vote on ballot measure 1, an oil tax change that has serious implications for our state's short and long-term economic future. Make sure you know the facts about how this ballot measure will impact jobs, our economy, and future generations. As Alaskans, it's up to us. Learn more at onealaska.com and please make a plan to vote this November.
Oh, okay. So we're good. Okay. Sorry about that. The joys of Zoom. Thank you again to our candidates for participating in the 2020 Online Political Forum series. We at the Fairbanks Chamber appreciate your flexibility and willingness to try this new online format with us. Thank you to our audience for informing yourselves about the coming election in this unusual year. Recordings of all 2020 Fairbanks Chamber forums can be found on fairbankschamber.org. And our next event in the series will take place Tuesday, October 6th, and will focus on ballot measure 1. Please join us online for that discussion. We encourage you to cast your vote in the municipal elections on Tuesday, October 6th, and don't forget that you can request an absentee ballot for the municipal and general elections today. Thank you for joining us.